It is another day, which means it is time for another episode of Voices in the Game. We are so happy you all are joining us for another episode that I am very excited about because we have a very exciting guest on today's episode. He has literally seen it all in the sports industry, working as a sportscaster for 5 decades. He has been the voice of Robert Morris men's basketball since 1987 and the voice of Robert Morris football since the program's inception in 1994. He is a Robert Morris Hall of Famer and a Hall of Famer of the Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasters. He is Mr. Chris Shovlin. Chris, thank you so much for coming on, my friend. I can't wait to get our conversation started.
Colson, thanks for the great introduction. I feel like I'm under a lot of pressure now that you've done all that, but I do appreciate the invitation to be on your show, and it's an honor for me to be with you here today.
Thank you so much, Chris. And there's absolutely no pressure at all, my friend. I'm very excited to get our conversation started. And Chris, I would love to go back to the beginning. When did you first start to get that desire that you wanted to be a play-by-play announcer? And was there really any game that you watched or listened to growing up that really sparked your interest?
Well, that's an interesting question. And actually, I work in the town where I grew up. I'm back in Midland, Pennsylvania. I went to Midland High School. And when I was a kid, our high school basketball team won a state championship in 1965. I was only in fifth grade. There were a couple of guys who ended up in the NBA and the ABA. Simi Hill, who played for a number of teams in the ABA, and Norman Van Leer, who was an NBA All-Star. These are guys who grew up, 4 or 5 blocks away from where I grew up, and they were my heroes when I was a kid. And my dad, my mom took our family to all of the high school games, whether they were at home or whether they were relatively close. And the first time I saw a Pennsylvania State Championship basketball game was when I was in fifth grade, when those guys won at the Harrisburg Farm Show Arena. And that was my first overnight road trip for a basketball game. I got to stay in a hotel. My dad took me and a bunch of his buddies, and we stayed in a hotel after driving over to Harrisburg, and just fell in love with sports at the time. And we always had a radio on no matter where we were. My grandparents had a little grocery store here in town. There was always a radio on. My dad was always listening to the Pirates. And back then, not so much to the Steelers, but it was mostly the Pirates and a lot of high school sports. And there was a guy who was a local sportscaster here in Beaver County by the name of Chuck Wilson, who worked at WBVP Radio. And I got to meet Chuck when I was a kid, and I kind of idolized Chuck, and I idolized Bob Prince. And a few years later, I ended up having Chuck's job, and I worked at WBVP for 13 years. I was the sportscaster there, and I ended up being the general manager there too. And I ended up working with Bob Prince, the voice of the Pirates, for a couple of years. I co-hosted a talk show and served as his producer on a 16-station local radio network called the Gunner Network, which was named after him. So, getting to work with your heroes and getting to work alongside of them, it's a distinct honor and a privilege. But those are the guys that I idolized when I was a kid. I grew up wanting to be them, and I ended up kind of being them.
Yes, we will definitely get to your time getting a chance to work with the gunner himself, Bob Prince. But you also got your start at Westminster College in the Western PA area doing football, basketball, and baseball on the campus radio station. So how did that early exposure, Chris, really help you set you up for success when you hit the job market after you graduated?
One thing about college radio, Colton, is you get to make a lot of mistakes there and learn the ropes there. And I was very fortunate because at Westminster, we had a college radio station. At the time, it was called WKPS. I think they've changed the call letters since then. But we got to do a little bit of everything. I mean, it was a real live radio station. It was non-commercial, but we did everything except, hot products. And I got to be a disc jockey. I got to be a newscaster. I got to do sports play-by-play. As you said, I did football and basketball and baseball there. I actually called a wrestling match on radio one time, which I haven't done since. And don't ask me how I did it because it was kind of impossible, but you got to learn the ropes. You got to make mistakes. You learn the little intricacies of what it takes and the preparation that it takes to do this. So it was a great learning opportunity being at Westminster and having a live radio station. And what was even nicer about doing games at Westminster, the football and basketball games were simulcast on a commercial station in Newcastle at the time on WKST. So we were on real radio as well. It wasn't just college radio, but it was real commercial radio. So we had to watch our P's and Q's, and we had to be as good as we could be. And one of the real blessings of that is when we were on the commercial stations, they were powerful enough that like my family was able to listen to me back here at home, which was kind of cool. At least cool for me. I don't know how cool it was for them to have to put up with me back in those days, but it was a great learning experience. But it was real radio, and we took it seriously.
So how many miles was it then, from your home all the way up to Westminster? How many miles did that cover then?
It was about 40, 45 miles, something like that. And the radio station in Newcastle had a really good 5,000 watt signal. So, we were able to hear it here in Midland in Beaver County. So we were just really seriously a county away. So it wasn't that far. There was a little bit of static, and it was AM radio. But, it was listenable. It was listenable.
And, like you mentioned, talking about your time working with, not only one of the most legendary broadcasters in Pittsburgh sports history, but also one of the most legendary broadcasters in all of baseball, the gunner, Bob Prince. So what was that experience like, Chris, working with Bob? And, what were some of those biggest lessons that you learned? Because I would imagine you really learned a lot from him.
I learned from Bob how to be entertaining, I think, first and foremost, and probably how to interact with the listeners and try to get across that I was talking to one listener at a time. Everybody out there has a different set of ears, a different mind, and the idea of communicating and painting a picture. And in this case, it was talk radio and trying to be informative as well and knowledgeable as well. I think, trying to connect with that listener one-on-one was the lesson that I learned from Bob. And also, being a personality. He was a piece of work. There's no question about it. I mean, most of the stories that you probably heard about Bob Prince were true. And, I can remember just the interactions that we had in person were mainly at spring training. And we would go down there when the Pirates were getting ready for the baseball season. And just the experience of being with him there and interacting with him and watching how people interacted with him. It was amazing. It was an amazing lesson, no question about it. Back when we were in Pittsburgh doing the show, I was in a studio and Bob was home, or he might have been in Bradenton, and he would be on the phone doing the show. So the only time we actually did the show together in person was when we were at spring training. But I remember, on one occasion, you want to talk about how wild Bob was. I remember doing the show one day, and it was a Saturday morning when these things aired. They aired between 10 and noon. And like I said earlier, they were on 16 different radio stations around the area, across the tri-state area. And I can hear water splashing in the background the whole time that, he was on. We were co-hosting a 2-hour radio show. And, it got to a point where during one of the commercial breaks, I said, Bob, I said, I hear water splashing. What's going on? He said, Chrissy, I'm in the bathtub. And he was. He was literally taking a bath while we were doing the show. And he told me, he said he had back problems, and the doctor told him to lie in the tub and turn the water on as hot as he could stand it. And every once in a while, I mean, I can't even remember who the guest was that day, but we had some pretty significant guests. I mean, we had Major League Baseball players, we had big time NFL stars, we had Hall of Famers, we had umpires who would call into the show. But he was lying in the bathtub, and I can hear the water splashing in the background because he was trying to relieve his back pain. So, that's just one of the crazy stories that I remember from doing that show about 40 years ago or so.
That seems like a story that you'll probably never hear again from
I,
anybody in this business.
I can't get it out of my head, to be quite honest with you, because I can still hear the splashing when I think about it.
Oh my, that is extraordinary, Chris. And going back to what you said, how did people interact with him? Because I'm sure when you worked with him, he was obviously already established, as one of the top broadcasters in baseball history.
He was, and this was after the Pirates and KDKA radio let him go. And the thing is, I mean, the Gunner Network was kind of his comeback to get back on the radio on a consistent basis. Plus, he ended up getting back with the Pirates anyway, because when they started KBL, which has evolved into Sportsnet Pittsburgh these days, and I mean, it's gone through a number of iterations. But when they started KBL, they invited Bob to come back to broadcast the Pirates games. But to answer your question, Colton, when I was with him in Bradenton, it was nonstop. People would come up to him. He had always wore flashy clothing, or he had a pirate, warm-up jacket on, or a crazy hat, and never wore socks. But when people saw him, they immediately gravitated to him, and he was just magnetic. And he always treated everybody who walked up to him with great dignity and great joy in meeting them. So, it's another lesson learned that, if somebody walks up to you and appreciates what you do, you make sure that, you pay that compliment back to them.
That is amazing, Chris. And fast forwarding to 1987, where you got an opportunity that, pretty much changed your life with getting the chance to call Robert Morris basketball. So before you got the job, what were the things that you already knew about Robert Morris, and how did the opportunity come about for you to call their basketball games?
Well, it was kind of interesting, Colton, because when I was doing the Gunner Network with Bob, I remember being invited to a Robert Morris basketball game. And I know that, I'm 5'6" tall. I can't dribble. I can't shoot. I can't do anything with a basketball. I mean, I love calling the game. I think I'm pretty decent at calling the game, but I cannot play the game of basketball. But I was invited by Robert Morris to come to a game that they were playing at the old convention center in downtown Pittsburgh. And I think they were either playing Drexel or Army. But I remember being invited out to play in the preliminary and to hang around for the basketball game. So there were a bunch of media people, radio people, newspaper people, television people who played in this game. And I remember I had the flu. I didn't feel well, but I wanted to go and I wanted to play on the floor. They moved the floor from the old Civic Arena into the convention center, and they allowed us to play on this thing before Robert Morris had their game that night. So it was the first Robert Morris basketball game I had ever attended. I got in. I shot this jumper from the corner. It would have been a three these days, but there was no three-point line back then. And I remember there was a guy, he was a reporter for the Post-Gazette or the Press named Ken Ritz, and he had to be about 6'7" or something like that. And I'm standing in the corner. They passed the ball to me. No one's watching me because they figured, he's not going to shoot. He's 5'6". Look at him. He's not even built like a basketball player. So I let this thing go, and I saw Ritz coming at me. And I mean, he jumped as high as he could and landed into me. And I don't know what kind of arc I had on that ball, but it went in. And all I can remember is I was deep in the corner, and I could hear boom, boom, boom. And it rattled, and it went in. And Randy Cosgrove, who was the voice of the Colonials before me, screams, "Chris Shovlin from the Gunner Network. Oh my God, he hits the big shot." And I mean, I took myself out of the game because I couldn't breathe. I had the flu that night. And I got to watch the Robert Morris game. And I remember Chipper Harris and Bay Grant, two Hall of Famers, and Robert Morris played in that game. And that was back in the early 80s. I think it was the 82-83 season. That was the first and only Robert Morris game I had ever seen. I was working full-time at the Beaver Falls radio stations, which were WBVP and at that time WWKS, which was KISS FM. And Robert Morris, a few years after that game that I saw, approached me and said that they were looking for a radio station on which to broadcast the games. And it was Randy Cosgrove who was the play-by-play guy, but Bob Miller was sort of in charge of athletics, although he was like a special assistant to the president, who was Charles Sewell at the time. And they approached me and said, we want to buy some airtime. We want our games on a radio station, and we had a 50,000 watt FM station in KISS 107. So I talked to the owners of the radio station, and they said, sure. So we sold Robert Morris the airtime, and we started carrying the games, and we carried them for a couple of years. And Randy and Robert Morris had some sort of falling out, so they were looking for a play-by-play guy right before the 1987 season. And they asked me if I'd be interested, and I said, I don't know. I'm a Beaver County guy. I'll just do, stay home and just work. And I was a GM of the radio station at the time. The owner of the radio station said, look, I'm going to tell you something. I'm never going to be able to give you a raise. So if you want to make more money, maybe you ought to take that job. So Robert Morris asked me again, and I said, yeah, let's talk about it. So Bob Miller called me into the office in Pittsburgh. At that time, they had that building right across from where Duquesne University is. And I went there and I met with him and Evan Paddock and signed a deal with them. I was going to do their games for 2 years. And it ended up that I'm getting ready for my 39th season of Robert Morris basketball now. So that's how long I've been there. But it's been a fun ride. I mean, it's been great, but that's how it started. I mean, literally, because they came to me because I was managing the radio station that the games were carried on, and they were looking for a play-by-play guy.
So how much time, Chris, did you have to get ready for that 1987 season? Because it seemed like that they asked you a little bit last minute. Actually,
it was over the summer, so it wasn't so much last minute. But I had, I'm going to say it was maybe August when they came to me, and by September I said okay, and then I started going to practice when the team got on the court. And at that time, Jared Durham was the head basketball coach. Jimmy Elias, who's my color analyst, was his top assistant. And there was a guy named Baker Neal there. And the sports information director was Sam Shulo, who's the great sports writer who ended up working with the University of Pittsburgh all those years and has written so many books about the Pitt Panthers. But Sam was my partner on the road. And a guy named Bruce Fry was my partner at home. And again, I started out. I got to know everybody before the season started, and the first game that I called was Robert Morris at Pitt, believe it or not. And from that point on, I've been calling their games. So, fast forwarding to 1989, why did you decide at that time, to stay a little longer, since you said your contract was only 2 seasons? I fell in love with it. I'll be honest with you, Colton. I caught the bug. I really liked it. I liked the guys. I liked the coaching staff. I liked the university. I mean, everybody treated me very, very well there. It was extra money, and that helped. My family was really young at that time. My kids were little. I have 2 daughters, and I think when I started at Robert Morris, they might have been 8 and 4. So they kind of grew up with me doing this, and it's been fun for our whole family. But as time went on, too, the basketball team started getting really good. And after struggling for the first couple of years that I was there, here it is. It's 1988-89, and they make the NCAA tournament, and I get to go to the tournament with them and call an NCAA game in Boise, Idaho, against one of the top teams of the country, Arizona. I think they might have been ranked number 1 at the time. And it's just been a thrill ever since. Yes, definitely, Chris. And then sticking with basketball, you talked about the NCAA tournament. One of the more memorable stories that I'm sure you've probably told 1,000 times at this point was when the Colonials played UCLA in 1992. So can you go over the backstory of that for people who have not heard the story yet? Probably why I'm bald to this day, to be quite honest with you. But no, the UCLA game, it was the third time in 4 years that Robert Morris had gotten to the NCAA tournament. That first year they played Arizona. The next year they played Kansas at the Omni in Atlanta. The year after that, St. Francis won the conference and got to go to the tournament. And the fourth year, it was Robert Morris versus UCLA. I'm going to tell you something. I grew up a UCLA basketball fan with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and all of those great players down through the years. And it was just a thrill for me to be able to call a Robert Morris game against UCLA. Well, the funny thing is, earlier in that season, Robert Morris had been struggling. And I remember being on the road with the basketball team at Florida State. And Jeff Waller was my partner by then. And Jeff and I were in the lobby waiting for the guys to come down to go to the game, to get in the bus to go to the game against Florida State. And the elevator door opens, and almost every one of the players had shaved their heads. And I said, what are you guys doing? I remember Wade Timerson and a couple of the other guys saying, we're just trying to change things up. We're trying to change things up. And I remember, I'm pretty sure it was Wade. He said, you need to go bald too. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, the way you guys have been playing lately and the way you're struggling, if you make the NCAA tournament again, you can shave my head too. So they said, okay. So we go out and go to the game, and they lose to Florida State by about 30 points. So I figure I'm safe. Nothing's going to happen. Well, they get into the regular season and they start winning. And I remember Joe Folletta was playing for us at the time. And every time they won a game, Joe kept saying, let's get closer. Let's get closer. And he'd come over and rub my head. Ricky Cannon, same thing. And like everybody on the team was razzing me, because every time they won a game, they kept saying, you're gonna have to be bold with us. So we get to the tournament, and I did not want to back out on my bet. I told the guys, I said, if you want to do this, that's fine. So believe it or not, Marty Galosi was our sports information director at the time. Now one of the bigwigs in the athletic department, Robert Morris. And I don't know if he arranged for CBS to follow me around with a camera or what, but the CBS television crew came into the locker room. The guys got a buzz cutter, and I was bald. And I called the game with no hair that night in Tempe, Arizona, at Arizona State's building. And I remember that Brad Nessler and Ann Myers Drysdale were calling the game that night, and they ripped on me pretty good. And my wife was at home and wasn't real happy with what she saw on TV, but it eventually did grow back. But since that time, as you can see, it's vanished again. But yeah, it was a memorable experience. I've learned to keep my mouth shut ever since.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what was your wife and daughter's reaction, but that story is amazing, Chris.
It was. And the thing is, after in hindsight, I felt bad because I thought I should not have taken attention away from the basketball team. And I realized I thought at the time I was trying to relieve some tension and try to make everybody laugh and forget about the fact that they were playing UCLA. But I still, to a certain extent, feel guilty because I put myself out there in front of the team. And I feel bad about that because I never wanted to. I don't do this to get attention. I do this because I love calling the game and telling the story, and especially on the radio side, painting a picture. And that's my real job. It's not to be out in front. It's to be in the back. It's to be the person who's painting the picture.
And you've talked about a few of them, but you've had a chance to call 8 NCAA tournament games that the Colonials have played, including in Cleveland last March when you guys took on Alabama. So out of those 8, Chris, is there a certain game that stands out to you the most?
I think they all do, Colton, to be quite honest with you. They all have, I have the individual memories of every one of them. The 2015 game against Duke was special. They were number 1 in the nation too. They ended up winning the national championship. But I remember that game specifically because at the beginning of our conversation, I told you that, as a fifth grader, I got to go to Harrisburg to see my high school team play in the state championship. And I'll never forget, it was March 20th, 1965. If you turn the clock 50 years further, on March 20th, 2015, I was in Charlotte calling Robert Morris versus Duke. So March 20th is kind of a date that sticks out to me. And, the fact that 50 years had passed from the time I went on my first road trip to a basketball game, my first overnight stay at a basketball game. And here I am 50 years later, I'm still calling basketball, or I'm, associated with basketball. That always stood out to me. This most recent trip that we took with the Colonials, and they got to play Alabama in Cleveland, is always going to be special, because I kind of wondered if we'd ever get back. It had been 10 years since the last trip, since Andy and the Colonials got to go. And, Andy Toole's been just, I love the guy. He's one of my favorite people as far as, people in sports is concerned. But, it's so special because he's let me inside the program. When we go on the road, I'm at the team meals. If they have a team meeting, I'm at the team meeting. I get to watch the scout, the film session. I've always been allowed to be inside. And I can't tell you what that means to me. And I've told him that before. And I hope he realizes how special it is for me to be a part that close to the team, and that close to being a part of the team. But even though I'm still, the play-by-play guy, but it's always been special. But this last trip, I wasn't sure if we were ever going to get back to the tournament again. But the Colonials did it. I remember the first game of the season we played at WVU, and I think it was 24-0 before Robert Morris finally got a bucket. And, Jimmy Elias and I are like looking into each other and like, is this game ever going to end? Well, they finally woke up and got the jitters out of the way. And it was a relatively new basketball team this year because of the transfer portal and everything that happens in the NCAA these days. But, once they got their legs underneath them, that was a superb basketball team that Andy put together this year. And these guys, they were so much fun to be around. And there were some characters on the team, but there's some real nice people on this basketball team. And to see them get to go, it was special. I was so happy for them. And frankly, I was happy for us because, like I said, I didn't know if we were ever going to get a chance to go again.
Yeah, and Chris, I was watching that game like pretty much everybody else in Western Pennsylvania. My heart was beating so fast because I seriously thought you guys were going to pull it off. That was a terrific game. I know that you guys came up a little bit short, but, I was just, I took a lot of pride watching that game, being Western PA guy. I always loved to cheer for Pitt, Duquesne, Robert Morris, with me doing broadcast work for Mercyhurst as well. I love those guys to death as well. But, I was, I really took a lot of pride watching that game, knowing how you guys fought that whole game against a team that, a lot of people were picking to win the national championship that year. That really was a great game.
Yeah, everybody was really behind Robert Morris this year at Colton. And, when it got down to 7 minutes left in the game, we're up. And, the Colonials are looking like, oh, they're gonna knock off Alabama. And then Alabama puts the big guy in. And, the tide turned. But it was special. It was special. I'll be honest with you, I am not embarrassed to tell you. I had tears in my eyes after that game ended because I thought that might have been the point where Robert Morris was going to upset somebody in the big dance. And they were that close. It just didn't happen. But I got emotional after the game because I like those kids so much. And, like I said, I love Andy Toole, and, I just want to see him do well. And I'm so glad that he's going to be back this year with Robert Morris, because I thought for sure he might get picked up by somebody else, but he's still here. He's still with us. And hopefully he's in the process. And I know I went to basketball practice a couple of weeks ago, And I know he's in the process of trying to put a new team together because he has just about everybody new with the exception of maybe 3 guys.
Yeah, that's all awesome, Chris. And, like you just talked about, how is it like building those relationships with players and coaches, because it seems it's a little different with players because it's a rotating door, with coaches, like Coach Toole, they could be there long, or, coaches, could be here for just a little bit and they can go somewhere else.
People are people. And, everybody talks about, oh, kids don't talk to each other anymore. They're always on their phones. They're, they keep their heads down. No, this was a great group of guys. I mean, when I travel with them, that's when I get to spend the time that I spend with them. At home games, I mean, they see me on game days, and that's pretty much it. Or I might stop in and watch a practice if I'm on campus. If there's a football game on a Saturday and they're practicing Saturday morning, I'll stop in and watch. Or, if I have a chance to be in Moon Township, I'll jump into the UPMC Event Center and take a look. But when we're on the road, I mean, you're on a bus, you're at bus stops, you're at meals, you're at restaurants, pretty much, bump into each other in the hotels too. So, you get to know people, you get to know their families. And a lot of times it's their families who come over. If they're on the road, they'll stop over and they'll tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, I've been watching the games or I've been listening to the games. Just wanted to say hi. Thanks for what you do for our kids. And, it's just conversation. That's all. You get to meet people and it's pretty cool. You get close to them after a while too.
And another game that stands out in the history of Robert Morris basketball is 2013 during the NIT tournament. All the significance around that game with Coach Calipari, for anybody who doesn't know, he was, of course, at Kentucky at the time, but he literally grew up miles away from Robert Morris's campus. So what was the impact of that game at the Chuck, with all of the significance around it, with Coach Calipari literally coming home, and then you guys were able to get the upset to take down Kentucky?
Yeah, it wasn't even that many miles that he grew up. He grew up literally like right in the neighborhood. And I think somebody told me his mom worked in the cafeteria at Robert Morris when he was a kid. But I'll be honest with you, Colton, the whole atmosphere was surreal. I mean, I remember getting there extremely early because they kept telling us, look, it's going to be a mob scene. You're not going to be able to get parked. You're not going to be able to get into the building. We're going to have to secure the building because there's so many people coming, not only from Kentucky, but people from Pittsburgh who wanted to be at that game, and they were going to do everything they could to try to get in there. So I got there extremely early, and there was a nervous tension in the air because everybody wanted to. Everybody knew this was a big time, once in a lifetime type game where, Kentucky from the SEC was coming to play on our floor, Robert Morris, and, it was back in the Sewell Center back then. It wasn't even the UPMC Event Center. So, it was just everybody was on pins and needles. Everybody wanted to make sure that everything went off perfectly. So there was a bit of a tension in the air, but, once the game got going, it was just a basketball game. But it was kind of funny because there were people from Kentucky that I talked to, and I heard some things behind us from the stands. People saying, "Wow, I've never sat this close to the Kentucky basketball team before." And people who had season tickets at Rupp Arena were like amazed that I can't believe I'm this close to the floor and how small this place is and how cute it is here. I mean, comments like that. But like I said, once the game started, it was basketball, and again, even the game was surreal. Just the fact that Robert Morris, that group of guys that the Colonials had on the floor that night, just took it right to Kentucky and played their hearts out. And I've heard that the Kentucky basketball team that year was giving Calipari fits, and he wanted the game to be at Robert Morris because Rupp wasn't available, because it was being used for the NCAA tournament. So he wanted it to be at Robert Morris to show them that, this is what, mid-major and small-level college basketball teams play, and these are the types of building. And I'm going to show you guys. We're going to go on the road, and it was almost like he was punishing them, and they did not respond well to it. But I don't care what anybody says about the way Kentucky played or their attitude that night. Robert Morris beat them and beat them soundly. It was a great game.
Yes, definitely, Chris. And then switching over to the football side of Robert Morris. So what were your initial thoughts in the early 90s when you first heard that Robert Morris might be adding a football program?
I was happy about it because I thought, okay, I have something to do in the fall now, because back then I wasn't doing any football. I had left the stations that I was managing in Beaver Falls, and I took a job at Wish 99.7 and WJAS in Pittsburgh. And I started there, and I worked there for 24 years, but I wasn't doing any high school football at all on the radio then. So when Robert Morris decided to announce that he was going to have a football team, I was pretty happy about it. Wasn't sure what we were going to get into, wasn't sure how big it was going to be. And then they came out and said, we're going to hire the former coach of the New York Jets, Joe Walton. And I'm thinking to myself, this is crazy. You got to be kidding. Joe Walton's available and he wants the job. He wants to come here. And he literally, we started talking with Joe immediately. I'm going to confess, I've been a Jets fan since I was a kid, because where I live, I live in Beaver County, so this is Joe Namath territory. So I've been a Jets fan since Joe Namath was the rookie with the New York Jets. And when I heard that Joe Walton was coming, I almost lost my mind. And to get to know him, and I had met him a couple of times before because friends of mine in Beaver Falls were friends of his. And, just getting to know him intimately and knowing his family and working with him and just tapping his brain when it came to football, it was magic. And, when they say the Colonials didn't even have a chin strap, that's truth. I mean, I understand that when they took this, they took a photo of Joe for publicity purposes, and they put him on the little schedule cards to hand out. They had to go to Kmart and buy a football because they didn't have a football to put in the picture with them. So, just to start the program from scratch and bring in guys like Dan Radakovich, Bad Rad, and then start assembling a football team, it was just an amazing thing to watch and to be a part of something from day one. I mean, how many play-by-play guys do you know who can say, yeah, I was there for the first football game? I mean, most football programs are 100, 120 years old. Ours started in 1994. So I've seen almost every game, with the exception of some that I had to miss because either I was with a basketball team or I had a couple of health scares. I had some back surgeries. So I missed a few games here and there, but for all intents and purposes, I've gotten to see the entire history of this thing, and it's been fun.
Who was that first game against, Chris? And, how was that feeling like when you were calling that first season in 1994, knowing that it was literally history?
I remember Colton driving to Waynesburg with Jeff Waller, my broadcast partner, and we didn't have a clue as to what was going to happen. It was a September day. It was beautiful. It was sunny. It was warm. And they played Waynesburg, and we had no expectations at all. We didn't even know the football team. I mean, we barely knew who the players were. So we were sitting there studying rosters as the game was going on, trying to figure out who was who. It just played out that they won the game, and they literally, it went down to the wire. And like Jeff and I looked at each other after the game, it's like, they won. And then they won the next game and the game after that. And pretty soon, they were 5-0 and Duquesne was 5-0. And I remember the first time Robert Morris and Duquesne played, it was the first season of Robert Morris football. They're both 5-0. They play at Moon Stadium. There were 8,016 people. I'll never forget that number. 8,016 people to watch Robert Morris play Duquesne in football at Moon Stadium in the first year that the program ever existed, and Robert Morris won that game. So they ended up going 7-1-1 that year, and it built from there. And the players that Coach Walton and Coach Rad brought in were amazing people. Some of them are friends to this day. And I remember those original Colonials. It's a great bunch of guys. And eventually they ended up going 10-0 and winning that mythical mid-major national championship in 2000. So again, just watching it build from nothing into respectability, and just one of the better programs at that level of the country. It's been an amazing thing.
And all that building paid off in 2010 when you guys captured the NEC championship and then went all the way to Fargo, North Dakota to take on North Dakota State in 2010. How was that experience like, going to North Dakota and broadcasting that game in the first ever game in the FCS playoffs for Robert Morris football?
Well, for me personally, it was the first time I'd ever done a game in a dome. I had never done an indoor football game before, and the Fargo Dome is the home of the Bison of North Dakota State, and that was an experience in and of itself. But that football team, that Robert Morris football team, gave North Dakota State all it could handle for 3.5 quarters, and they just. North Dakota State was just so much bigger, so much stronger that they just wore them out at the tail end of the game. But what an effort by that Robert Morris football team. That was an excellent team too. And again, great bunch of people on that football club, and just a super experience going to that level. And it may have been one of the bigger games in the history of Robert Morris football as well.
And, I know this is a loaded question for you, with all the arenas that you have had a chance to broadcast in your 38 years doing Robert Morris basketball, and then your 30 plus years doing Robert Morris football. So if you can think of any arenas, Chris, that stand out, that were your favorite away arenas at basketball and football.
Wow. That's a tough question. That really is a tough question. Obviously the arenas in basketball, the places that we played in the NCAA tournament stick out. Whether it was the building in Boise, Idaho, which was the first place, the first big building that we were in, or the arena in Charlotte where we played Duke. We played in the Dome in Minneapolis against Michigan State. And I remember, 2 days before the game, we got there, and, I'm walking around, and this guy in a green jacket comes over and reaches out his hand and says hello, and it's Tom Izzo. And, it's just, there's so many nice people in this sport. But, back to your question, I don't know if one arena or a couple of arenas really stick out. I mean, even the home of the Cavaliers, where the Colonials played this past March. I mean, it was an experience being in that building. And, we've been in some really, really nice places. Football wise, I think, the one that really sticks out is the one that you brought up, and that's the Fargo Dome, because it is a dome. Although a couple of years ago, Robert Morris opened up the season at Air Force, and it was an experience being there and seeing all the pageantry there. Although, what they say about the air being thin there, it's true. It really is true.
Yeah, that is awesome, Chris. Yeah, and this is such an amazing conversation. I'm so happy I was able to get you on. And how is it like for you to get to see the growth of not just Robert Morris athletics, but just college sports in general during your 30 plus years being a college play-by-play announcer at the D1 level?
Well, Colton, first of all, let me tell you what an honor it is for me to be able to talk to you on this program. And I really appreciate the invitation. But as far as, the growth of basketball, just watching the NCAA tournament every year. I mean, I was addicted to basketball as a kid, and I followed it forever. I mean, like I said, I grew up a UCLA fan. Back then, there wasn't much of an opportunity to see those teams on TV. I was in love with the Marquette team that Al McGuire put together and the personality that he was. And then I got to watch Bird and Magic when they played each other, Michigan State versus Indiana State. And I've been an NCAA basketball fan forever. So just watching the growth of March Madness, the big dance, how it's really been catapulted. And now, like, you can see every game at any time. I mean, literally every game in the NCAA tournament is on somewhere. And, when it comes down to March, and it's funny, my oldest daughter is a real big hoops fan too. And we'll be on the phone talking to each other, and we'll both be flicking, the remotes, going back and forth. And, she'll call me and say, "Hey, you watching this one?" And I said, "No, I'm watching this one over here." And it's amazing. And my wife, the same way. Even my youngest daughter, it's caught fire for her too, although she's a big hockey fan, not a basketball fan. But, just watching how the sport has grown, and football the same way. I mean, just watching the Robert Morris program grow the way it has down through the years. And, and the best part of it's the people involved. I mean, just getting to know some of the best people that I've ever met in my life through this. I mean, it's just been a joy. It's been a joy. I have to say one thing. This past March, when Robert Morris played at Alabama in the NCAA tournament, I can't tell you how many people in my family were at the game. Like both of my daughters, my wife. I had a sister there, one of her friends, my brother and his wife came, and the rest of our family who couldn't come to the game in person, they were watching all over the country and just going nuts over Robert Morris basketball this year. And they watched all of the games leading up to that one. But being in Cleveland this year allowed a lot of my relatives to be there, and it was a thrill for me to have them there, and then hanging out in the hotel after the game. So, again, you want to talk about special feelings and special memories. And I know the families of the players were there, the families of the coaches were there as well. So that's what makes this so special, is the people and the people you get to know.
And what do you think the over-under is, Chris, for how many people have asked you what is your favorite game you have called in your career, Robert Morris?
A lot of people have asked me that. Just about everybody in these types of venues have asked me that, and I usually surprise them. And Coach Toole and I talk about this all the time, but and I know people expect me to say, "Oh, it was the Kentucky game," or "Oh, it was the Alabama game," or "Oh, it was the UCLA game." Robert Morris played in the Northeast Conference Championship game several years ago at Quinnipiac. And I bring that game up because it was nationally televised on ESPN, being the conference championship game. And we had some characters on that team. Russell Johnson was one. He was a power forward. And there were others on that team as well. They were really good guys, real characters. And I remember we got to the game really, really early. I think the tip time might have been 8:30 or 9 or something like that. But they had us come to the game at 5:00. And we walk into the building, and the Quinnipiac cheering section was already in the building. And these kids all had these yellow T-shirts on, and they were woofing their tails off at our players. And I remember Russell Johnson looking up into the crowd and laughing at them and woofing back at them. And Velton Jones was our point guard at that time. But, our guys were not intimidated by the crowd. And they were, I'll never forget, they were playing that Black Eyed Peas song, "I Got a Feeling That Tonight's Gonna Be a Good Night." I'm not going to sing to you, but you get the picture. And I mean, the music's playing and it's blaring, and these kids are screaming at our players. And I'm thinking, our guys aren't intimidated. This is going to be something else. So game goes on. Robert Morris takes the lead at the tail end of the game, and our guys are just playing their butts off. I mean, they're strong, they're physical. And I remember Quinnipiac was favored to win, and they were favored to win the conference that year. all year long. And I remember at the tail end of the game, they had a really good player by the name of James Felding, and they had one last shot. He was 3/4 of the way up the court. He was on the other side of the floor from me, and he took a dribble and launched the ball and threw it at the hoop, and it took this amazing arch and hit the bankboard, and then it hit the rim, and it bounced twice on the floor, and the ball hit my table and landed in my lap. That's how the game ended. I was holding the basketball at the tail end of the game. But it wasn't just the fact that I had my hands on the ball and then people started, they were like reaching over my shoulder to try to grab it. It was crazy. I mean, the ball, he missed the shot. It hits the floor a couple of times, hits the table, and it lands right here. And I'm holding the ball. And I give it to Mike Rice after the game and say, here, this is yours. But I mean, that game sticks out to me because our guys were not going to back down no matter how the odds were stacked against them, how they weren't favorites in that game, and how tough that team was. That was a really good Quinnipiac basketball team. And our guys ended up winning. And again, Robert Morris takes us to the NCAA tournament.
38 years and over 1,100 basketball games later, and being the voice of Robert Morris football since the team became a program 31 years ago. Chris, have you ever just looked back at your career and just said, wow, to think I did all that?
I think we just did, but I have been lately. I mean, I turned 70 years old back in November. I mean, I'm starting to think I don't have much time left in doing this because either, physically it's going to catch up to me, or I'm just, I don't want to continue doing this unless I could do it at a decent level, at a high level. And because it wouldn't be fair to the viewers and the listeners for me to continue on if I wasn't doing a good job. So, I know years ago, Myron Cope had a deal with Joe Gordon, who was the great publicity director of the Steelers. And Myron told Joe, if I ever got to the point where I'm either embarrassing myself or embarrassing the broadcast, let me know and I'll walk away. Well, I had the same deal with Marty Galosi, our senior associate athletic director. I told him, I said, if I ever get to the point where you think I shouldn't be doing this, tell me and I'll walk. But the thing is, I mean, I want to do it forever. I want to do it for as long as I can. Colton, I am so blessed because there have been 3 NCAA Division I play-by-play announcers in Pittsburgh for the last 39 years almost. Ray Goss has been at Duquesne for 57 years. Bill Hillgrove's been at Pitt for 56 years. They're number 1 and number 2 in the entire NCAA as far as tenured announcers. I'm like 18th or 19th in the NCAA right now, and I've been at Robert Morris. It'll be 39 years. I know how special this position is, and I take it seriously. And again, I'm just honored to be able to do this. And do I want to keep doing it forever? Absolutely. But I realize that there's going to come a time when it's going to end. So again, to answer your question in long form, yeah, I've learned to appreciate every game, every moment, every trip, every home game. It's more meaningful now than it's ever been to me. And, I realize that, I'm very, very blessed, very, very lucky to have been doing this all these years and to have this opportunity because, again, I'm one of 3 people who've been able to do this for the last, 39 years in Pittsburgh.
And speaking of Bill Hillgrove, you also had the chance to fill in for Bill for Pitt basketball in the early 2000s when when Bill had commitments with Pitt football and the Steelers. So how was that like switching over to calling Pitt basketball when you did fill in for Bill?
Well, I'm going to go back and, a lesson that Joe Walton told me a long time ago, even though that's football. I remember, asking Joe, like, what's it like coaching here at Robert Morris as compared to being in the NFL? And he said, it's just football. Football's football. It was the same thing, but it was just basketball. I mean, I I think after those years that I was at Robert Morris, I knew how to call a basketball game. It just so happened that I was calling a game at the Peterson Event Center. I was calling a game with Dick Grote, who I grew up idolizing as a member of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And actually, it was Dick Grote who told Pitt that they ought to use me. And again, not to belabor the conversation, but I remember one time Robert Morris was playing Pitt in basketball, and I'm sitting there setting up my equipment, and I look across the floor, and Dick Grote's like this, and I'm thinking he must be waving to somebody behind me, and he's going. So I didn't acknowledge it. So he runs across the floor. And he says, "Chris, I was waving to you." And I'm thinking, this is Dick Grote. He knows who I am. He said, "I listen to you on the radio all the time." Well, I had no idea. He was a big WJS listener. And he knew me from being on the radio there. And he also heard me call Robert Morris basketball, because if he was in his car and Pitt wasn't playing and we were, he would listen to the games. And he actually he talked to some folks at Pitt and suggested that, if Bill ever had to miss a game, for them to call me, and they did. And, I give a lot of credit to Sam Shulo and to Dick Grote for doing that, and EJ Borghetti, of course. But what a thrill that was. But, going to Pitt and calling those games, yeah, it was a blast. I probably would have called a few more had the Steelers beaten the Patriots in the NFL playoffs one year. But when the Patriots, I was actually supposed to fill in for Bill at Villanova and then travel to Notre Dame to call a game for Pitt. And the Patriots knocked out the Steelers in the playoffs, so I never got the chance to do those games. But I did a handful of games at Pitt, and it was fun. And then one time, Princeton was playing Pitt in one of the smaller postseason tournaments, and Princeton's play-by-play announcer was doing their women's game. So Princeton calls me and says, "Hey, can you do the game in Pittsburgh since you're there?" I said, "Sure." So I called a game for Princeton against Pitt. So that was fun.
How about that? I never knew that, Chris, that you called a game for Princeton. That's really cool.
One game for Princeton. I even wore an orange necktie that night.
Oh, that is awesome, Chris. You really have had a chance to interact with a lot of broadcasters, the people know, like you mentioned, Brad Nessler, and what were some of those interactions like with some of those national broadcasters over the years? Because it really has seemed like you've met a lot of cool people in this industry.
Jim Nance and Bill Raftery and Grant Hill and Tracy Wolfson, they were at the venue in Charlotte when Robert Morris played Duke in the first round of the NCAA, or actually the second round of the NCAA tournament. That was the year that Robert Morris beat North Florida in the first four, and then we got to go to Charlotte. But yeah, Jimmy Elias and Matt Millett, Matt O'Brien, and a couple of the other guys, T.J. Brown, all from Robert Morris. We were all hanging around watching practice, and we're hanging around with CBS people, and they were as nice as could be. They were as nice as can be. Got to hang out with Ian Eagle in Dayton. Nice guy. But yeah, I mean, there were some really good people in basketball and in football and in sports in general, but there were really good people in broadcasting as well. And I got to meet Wayne Larrabee and got to know him. For those of us from around here, you might not recognize the name, but Wayne is the voice of the Green Bay Packers. But Wayne also calls the University of Milwaukee, Wisconsin basketball games. And every time we play Milwaukee, I run into Wayne and I talk with him, and it's so he's a great guy. Talk about Hall of Fame broadcasters. He's amazing. He used to broadcast the Chicago Bulls games as well. So it's been fun meeting these people.
And you had a chance for a long time to go back to your roots, broadcasting high school football and high school basketball as well. So what are some of your favorite memories when you were calling high school football and basketball when you were also at Robert Morris at the same time?
It's been a blast. I mean, it's kind of funny. One of the things that sticks out again, Jeff Waller, who was my partner at Robert Morris, ended up being the producer of a lot of the games that I worked for Xfinity and Comcast when I was their lead announcer for the high school football playoffs and high school basketball playoffs in Pittsburgh. And I remember there was a kid who ended up playing at Robert Morris named Matty McConnell. You might have seen his brother TJ play for the Indiana Pacers this year. Well, Matty hit a three-quarter of the court shot at the end of the third period of a playoff game that we were calling, and it was on the floor at the Peterson Event Center. And he was playing for Chartiers Valley High School at the time when he hit the shot. And I knew he had signed at Robert Morris. So when he hit that shot, it went in. I looked up into the stands, and I could see Andy Toole and a couple of his assistants up there just jumping right out of their chairs. So that was a thrill. One of the football thrills was I called Ellis Cannon and I called the highest scoring game in the history of the WPIL in football. It was 73-49. It was Keystone Oaks and Beaver outscored them 73-49. It was the highest scoring regular season game in the history of the WPIL, and we called that game. It was at Dormont at Keystone Oaks Stadium. So, those are things that stuck out. But, again, very blessed to work with some great people. John Sanders, who worked at KDKA TV for a long time, did some of the Pirate games, did the Cleveland Indians for a while. Meg Bolger, who is still broadcasting West Virginia women's basketball, and Meg's a great star. Working with her, and I mean, there are so many people. And I hate to leave people out, but it's been a thrill to be a part of this, and it's invigorating. I think it's really, really kept me young, being able to do this all these years.
And how has the industry changed, Chris, over time, compared to now to when you started in this business?
I think the easy answer is that radio is fading away. Radio isn't as popular as it was because you can televise almost anything right now. And video of sporting events is available not just on TV and not just over the air, but on cable. But like literally, you can hold up your cell phone and broadcast a picture. And I think the fact that video and streaming has taken over, that's been the big difference in broadcasting. And radio is slowly becoming a lost art. There is a huge difference between doing radio play-by-play and television play-by-play, as you know. I don't have to explain that to you. On radio, you're more responsible for painting a picture and describing everything in detail. And on video and television, you don't have to do that because the picture's there. So, it's a totally different animal. But I think, again, what's changed most about broadcasting is the fact that it's more video-based than audio-based these days.
And a little preview, Chris, for both Robert Morris football and basketball coming up. I want to start with football because on the day we are recording this interview, the NEC preseason poll was just released, and you guys are ranked third behind Duquesne and the defending champion Central Connecticut. But I'm curious, Chris, about the first game that you're going to be broadcasting coming up very soon, because you're going to be heading to Morgantown to take on West Virginia. So have you thought about, how it's going to be, and how excited are you calling this game, knowing that it's going to be the first West Virginia game that Rich Rodriguez has coached on the sideline since every West Virginia fan remembers on that cold December night in 2007 during the 2007 Backyard Brawl?
Well, I could tell you this. I'm looking at it as a David and Goliath game, and I think that's the natural way to look at it. It's going to be an uphill battle for Robert Morris. I expect that. Personally, I love calling games in big venues, so I'm looking forward to that just for my own selfish reasons. I just hope Robert Morris can hang with him, Colton. I really do. I mean, it's going to be. I think I'd feel better about going into the game if we were playing under the old rules, and the old rules are that you get to keep your players for a long period of time. I don't know what the official number is of lost players due to graduation, due to the fact that they ran out of eligibility because a lot of them were graduate students and some of them entered the portal. But I think it's around 57 players that Robert Morris lost after last season that either graduated or decided to change directions. With that said, that it makes it so much tougher to even have a guess as to what's going to happen in this game, because we're going to be looking at so many newcomers in this football game. And I realize West Virginia is probably in the same boat, but let's face it, they're going to have bigger, tougher, players that attract attention from teams in the Big 12 as opposed to a Northeast Conference football team. So it's going to be a difficult task for the football team. You just look at it as, you're going to go in, you're going to play football. I have to get ready for a pregame show. I have to get ready for identifying players. I have to have knowledge of both ball clubs. So I'm going to study this as a broadcaster the way I would study any game. I just, I'm going to be prepared if it kind of gets out of hand. I hope it doesn't. I hope Robert Morris can hang in there. I know that Robert Morris has hung in there with some pretty good football teams, including Utah State last year. They gave him a heck of a ride. And let's just hope that the chips fall in the right direction. To just go in there and call the game. That's it. Just go in and call the game.
And there's, of course, going to be, I think, some expectations for the 25-26 basketball season for Robert Morris, like we've been talking about, playing Alabama in the NCAA tournament and going in as the defending Horizon League champion. So what do you expect Coach Andy's boys to do for this season, knowing that it seems there might be a little more expectations going in as the defending Horizon League champions?
I don't want to put too much pressure on them, but I saw them in practice, and I only went to practice one time so far over the summer. I like what I saw. They're a little bit bigger. They might be a little bit tougher. I'm not sure. But, trying to replace the guys who played for Robert Morris in the last basketball season is going to be a very, very tall task. That team ended up gelling at the tail end of the season, and they looked so good. But there's gonna be some pressure on these younger guys coming in. Ryan Prather Jr. is the only regular who's coming back. I know that there are a couple of the walk-ons are back. Tanner O'Grady and Cyril Arbonitas are back. But for all intents and purposes, this is a brand new basketball club with those exceptions. So it's going to be interesting to see how Coach Toole puts this team together. I know that, like I said, they look bigger to me. They look tougher to me, but we'll see when they get on the floor how they gel. And, if anybody's going to be able to find some glue to assemble this club, it's going to be Andy Toole. He can get it done. He's something else.
And you also have had so many deserving awards come your way during your career, including being recognized in the Pittsburgh Basketball Club Hall of Fame, the Robert Morris Hall of Fame, and also last year when you were inducted into the Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasters Hall of Fame. So what was that experience like for you and your family, Chris, getting the notification that you were going to be inducted into the PA Association of Broadcasters Hall of Fame, and how was it like being at the ceremony?
To be honest with you, I was nervous. It's humbling. It really is. And, you hear people in those situations get up and say how humbled they are. I honestly, Colton, I didn't do all this to win awards. I did this because this is what I wanted to do, and this is what I thought I could contribute in sports. Frankly, this is the only way I can contribute through sports. But I'll be honest with you, it was I was emotional at each and every one of those things, and sometimes I wonder, did you really deserve, getting an award of this type? And I look at the list of people in those halls, the Beaver County Hall of Fame. I mean, there's Joe Namath and Tony Dorsett, Mike Ditka. I mean, I can go on and on. Darrell Revis. I mean, the list is astounding. It's like, do I belong with those guys? The same thing with the Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasters Hall of Fame a couple of years ago. I mean, Dick Clark is in that Hall of Fame. Jack Bogut got inducted this year. But even, my peers in the sports side of things, do I deserve to stand with Ray Goss and Bill Hillgrove? I don't know. Personally, I don't think so. But it was humbling and it was emotional. And I have a hard time, talking about me. I know we're talking about broadcasting. We're talking about Robert Morris. But I have a hard time talking about me. And you have to stand up in front of people and do that. So it gets to me. It does.
And finally, for you, Chris, what advice do you have for anybody who has an interest and desire in joining us in the sports industry?
Do it. I mean, seriously, it's I have a full-time job. I work at the Lincoln Park Performing Arts Center, and I'm one of the administrators here. And I've always had a full-time job in radio. My radio jobs have been as a newscaster, as a disc jockey, as a personality, as a promotions person. I've been in management in radio. When I do these games, it's kind of like, some people play golf, some people play tennis. I don't. I mean, I call games. That's what I do. It's kind of my hobby. And I do get paid for it, and don't tell anybody, but I probably wouldn't care if I didn't get paid for it because it's just so much fun. It's turned into a hobby for me, and I just love doing this. So if somebody wants to get into this, go ahead. If you want to make a living in doing it, work hard at it. Do the prep work, because really that's where this all starts. I mean, you can't just show up and call a game. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to know what you're going to say. You have to know what people around you are going to do. So, if you get into this position, and if you get into a job like this, just know that you're going to spend probably 20 times more preparing for the game than you will be calling the game. But if somebody wants to do this, go for it. Man, this is great. It's fun.
And Chris, just speaking for myself, my friend, you are more than deserving for everything that you have been recognized for in this industry, and I take great pride in being from Pittsburgh and from Western Pennsylvania because, I really am blessed, to be a part of this community with guys like yourself, Ray, and Bill, for being in this community with learning from the best to ever do it in this city, like with yourself, Ray, and Bill. I'm so honored, to call you a friend and to have you on this program, because there's somebody like me, who has that dream too of being a college play-by-play announcer on a full-time basis like yourself. I just can't thank you enough for coming on, and telling your story here, because I know everyone's going to love hearing your story.
Colton, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, and appreciate you asking me to be a part of this. I wish you nothing but the best, man. I hope you have half as much fun as I've had doing this all these years.